Hi everyone, this is Mr. Trio and I am pleased to present the second video of our series on paper number 1. As you may know, the first part of paper 1 focuses on questions in the A section, and this video focuses on question B. As a reminder, paper 1 is a 2-hour examination. Candidates get to choose which questions they get to answer, but at the end of the day, they have to answer 3 questions total, 2 questions from the core studies, and 1 question from the depth studies. The format of all of the questions is broken down into 3 parts: A for detailed answers, B for an analysis, and C which focus mainly on opinions. As I mentioned, this video specifically focuses on B questions. Now, there are a wide variety of different types of B questions that can appear in paper number 1. The first is cause and consequence. This often is asking you to look at a particular event and how the event somehow causes something to happen. Cause and effect, cause and consequence, an event and a reaction. The second type of question that often appears is change in continuity. Or in other words, you need to document things such as, were things getting better? Were things getting worse? Were things remaining the same? Were they going backwards? Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. It was good, then it was bad, and then it was good again. Or was it bad, good, and then bad again? Sometimes in history, we have turning points. And last but not least, sometimes in history, we deal with cycles. The third type of question that could appear, and this is a very common one, is looking at similarities and differences. For example, we have a duck and we have a platypus. They're 2 different animals, but as you may know, ducks and platypuses do have a lot of things in common with each other. Now, unfortunately, on a history exam, we don't get to have the opportunity to write fun essays like this, but I thought it would be a nice example to look at. Finally, questions in B can also focus on motives and intentions. Why do people in the past make bad decisions? In this type of question, we get to examine why people do what they do and specifically look at their actions and try to understand what was the motive behind it. So I hope this is a good introduction to B questions. All 4 of these can appear on paper number 1, and in the rest of the video, we're going to take a look at 2 particular types, similarities and differences, and also take a look at cause and effect. Now, before we get started, let's look at our history model again. With our question A, as you may remember, we started with looking at story and detail, and in question B, we start to get into comparisons and analysis. Now, you may notice I blocked out story and details because it's not really the focus of B, but you can't build this pyramid without having that bottom layer. So as we progress in B questions and then later in C, always remember your root material. Now, in our first video, we had a fun example about lions. So I thought that it would be nice to bring the lion back and take a look at a sample focus point that helps us get started and to start thinking about how these different types of questions can appear. So with the focus point, how is the lion used in popular culture? A solid B question that could appear is, how are lions and tigers used differently in popular culture? So think about how lions are used, how tigers are used, Can you think of any examples? I basically came up with 4 right off the top of my head. Once again, let's go back to the British coat of arms, in which the lion makes a part of it, Lions rugby, and then for some reason, maybe because I'm getting a little old and crickety, I think of Tiger Bomb. And by far, my favorite cereal growing up was always Kellogg's Frosted Flakes. So there's my friend Tony the Tiger. Now, these 4 pieces could not be more different from each other. And I have to admit, it took me a little bit of time, but essentially I came up with a plausible way to take these 4 pieces of evidence and make them into an essay. How did I do that? I came up with 2 categories, strength and health. I'm going to make the argument today that lions tend to be used more often to portray strength, while tigers in popular culture are often more related to health. I know, Tony the Tiger is not the most healthy cereal in the world, but it is a part of a balanced breakfast, so don't knock it. So, with this idea, how do we get started with our introduction? Let's take a look. Lions and tigers are 2 of the best known big cats. Now, we start with that because that is our background information. Just because we're working on B doesn't mean we can throw our story out the window. All essays should begin with some background information. Now, let's get into our topic sentence. They, however, are often depicted differently in popular culture. Lions are usually seen as a symbol of strength, and tigers are used in health-related adverts. Once again, I'm going directly to the categories that I created and are bringing in strength and health into that topic sentence. Now, let's take a look at 2 samples. On the left is an essay which starts with an introduction, then there's a paragraph all about lions, and then there's a paragraph all about tigers, and then your conclusion. As we've talked many times, essays often are like a hamburger in which you have a top and a bottom, and then your evidence is in the middle. But on the right-hand side, we have an essay which starts with the introduction, just like the first one. However, the first paragraph includes information about lions and tigers, and then the second paragraph includes information about lions and tigers, and then your conclusion at the bottom. If you were writing an essay or reading an essay, which of these 2 do you think is the more plausible approach? Which do you think makes a stronger argument when specifically trying to show similarities and differences between 2 things? If you chose the paragraph on the right, you are right. And I'll show you an example of why this is the case. Now, here's our 2 paragraphs. The first one, lions have long been known as the king of the jungle. Thus, they have been used by kings in coats of arms and other royal symbols. Tigers seldom are seen with royalty because of its long-standing connection to compassion. Think of our friend Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. Tigers are seen as fun, not serious, not necessarily something that would correspond to a coat of arms or a king. The bottom line is that what you see in this first paragraph is a argument for lions, and you automatically bring in the tiger information at the same time. If I were to write a paragraph only about lions, by the time you get to the second paragraph, you might not be able to remember those details. By placing it together, you are automatically, as a reader, able to see the back and forth and the similarities and differences. Let's, for example's sake, take a look at our second paragraph. Even today, tigers are sought after because many people believe their body parts can heal. Most poaching of lion is for their skins that are used for display. So once again, what I'm trying to do is talk about tigers and how they are related mainly to health-related advertisements in popular culture, and how the lion is not used in that capacity. It's done in a very different way. I hope this is a good example to show you how to write an effective similarities and difference essay in which you put the same information in the same paragraph in order for the reader to be able to understand the back and forth more effectively. Now, question B also, of course, relates to history. And once again, what I did was I went to a past paper and looked at a specific question that was asked candidates in 2015. The question that was asked was, why did the Gallipoli campaign of 1915 fail? So we're not talking about similarities and differences in this type of B question, but essentially we're talking about cause and consequence. What event occurred that caused something else to happen? The first thing that we need to know is, where is Gallipoli and who was involved? And one of the things that I've done in advance is think about this topic and try to break it into 3 specific categories. 3 of the main reasons why I believe the Gallipoli campaign failed is because of weather, terrain, and also leadership. So we're going to begin talking about this. I have a nice introduction that will give you some background information to what the Gallipoli campaign is. The Gallipoli campaign of 1915 had several key objectives: win a decisive victory for the Allies in the East, provide assistance to Russia, and knock Turkey out of the war. The plan was hatched to accomplish this by making an assault on the Gallipoli Peninsula and opening up a clear sea path to Russia. All of this information is background information. The more background information that you can provide explaining how you know about Gallipoli and what it means, the stronger your essay is going to be. But your introduction should, of course, also have your topic sentence, which I have here. The campaign failed for several reasons, including poor leadership, harsh weather conditions, and difficult terrain to capture. Now, let me take this opportunity to point out here. The question specifically says, why did the campaign fail? So, we are not going to spend a lot of time talking about things such as why it was successful, how the Gallipoli campaign is remembered today by Australians and New Zealand troops that fought during that time period. All of this is good information, but it's off topic. Once again, as I've said before, always try to focus on what the question is asking you and really just focus on what's being asked and try not to fill up too much of other information that just may be seen as something trivial or interesting to know. Now, what I have here is just a basic graph, or table, I guess I should say, that on the left-hand side puts down factors, cause, and consequence. Think about when you sit down to do a mathematical problem. More than likely, you wouldn't look at a mathematical problem and say, oh, the answer is 2. Many math students work out their math problems and show their work in order to get partial credit sometimes. What I would argue is that when you're doing history, it's essentially the same thing. You want to work out your ideas before you actually start writing your essay. That way you can have all your ideas poached first. So on the left-hand side, I came up with 3 major categories that led to the failure of the Gallipoli campaign. Leadership was the first one. The cause is that the British forces did not deploy enough troops in order to perform an effective attack on the Turkish positions. What was the consequence of that? The British forces were greatly outnumbered and suffered massive casualties on their assault. Now, imagine if you're writing an essay. What you would essentially want to see in each of the 3 paragraphs representing these 3 topics is this back and forth type of conversation in which you're introducing the reader to the cause and then you're telling them what happens. Let's take a look at weather. The weather was extremely hot, then extremely cold. What was the consequence of that? The soldiers suffered from exhaustion. The heat also made matters worse by spoiling the food and limiting drinking water. Last but not least, terrain. Turkish troops were protected from defensive positions, and the British troops had to approach from the sea and land. What happened because of this type of terrain? The British troops suffered terrible casualties because they were exposed to enemy fire on sea and on the open beach. For this particular example, by the way, I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about British troops, I'm referring to soldiers from England, Scotland, and I'm also talking about the Commonwealth countries such as New Zealand and Australia that also were a part of this campaign, and troops that suffered greatly during the campaign. So this is a brief introduction to question B for paper number 1. Let's go through sort of just the last bits. First, when answering a question, establish that story. What is the question asking you? Provide the background information, focus on what the question is being asked, and try to incorporate a topic sentence which includes those major categories that you've spent so much time developing. When you get into the detail, remember to determine the best approach for the question. Is it a similarities and differences question? Is it a question that is asking you to look at the intentions of a person? Is it a question that is looking at cause and consequence? Each of these different approaches, as I call them, you may want to approach the question and answering it in a different way. Always try to give at least 3 pieces of evidence in order to support the evidence that you claim for your answer. And always remember, your conclusion should always be at the end of the essay and reinforce that topic sentence which you first brought about. I hope this has been a helpful video to you. Of course, let's talk in private if you have any more questions. And as I mentioned before, check out the other videos on my site about different topics that are to come. Core studies topics and depth studies topics are coming. Once again, thanks for watching.